everyone. I am Fran Scott. I am a maker, pyrotechnician, and engineering presenter. Now, out of those three things, you will notice that I'm not a space expert. But before we get into that, I must apologise. I'm a little bit poorly at the moment. I'm a bit ill. So if the sound sounds a little bit off, if it sounds a bit nasally, then it's not my microphone, unfortunately. It is my face. And I must also apologise for not being in my studio. I'm actually at home at the moment, so you can have a little bit of an insight into my life. You can see my lovely bike, Christina, hanging on the wall there. So yeah, it's a bit unusual, but you know, we'll see how we go. But anyway, I got asked to talk about space for 10 minutes, and as we've already covered, I am not a space expert. So I was thinking about what I could talk about related to space for 10 minutes. And then I thought, well, actually, I've been in science communication for about 15 years. And throughout that career, I have worked with people who are experts in space. And I have done some amazing things that are related to space. So what I'm going to do is over the next 10 minutes talk to you about what I've done throughout my career related to space in like reverse chronological order. So from when I first started to nowadays. And hopefully there is something that sparks your interest. Okay, let's go. So in at number 5, let's start with 5. Now, gosh, this takes me back. So we're going to go right back to the start of my career. And at the start of my career, I worked at the Science Museum in London. And I was lucky enough to get promoted to the family programs. And in the family programs, what we would do is we would design tours around the objects. So it was a fantastic experience to be able to research some amazing objects and be able to explain them to families and children. And one of the objects that I loved writing a tour for, including in my tour, was one that's in the Making of the Modern World gallery. And for those of you who have been to the Science Museum will know this gallery, and you look on the floor and there's a timeline of dates, and along those timelines are dates of our objects that were invented around those dates. So you walk throughout the gallery and you get closer and closer to modern day. And when you get to the end, and it's almost modern day, you end up at the space age. And one of the objects that we've got, well, what the Science Museum has got, I couldn't fit it in my flat. One of the objects that the Science Museum has got is the command module from the Apollo 10 mission. Now, this is a phenomenal object. For those of you that have seen it will know how amazing it is. If you haven't seen it or don't know what a command module is, the command module is where the astronauts sit. It's like the bit that's right on top of the spacecraft. It's the bit that orbits the moon, doesn't go to the moon, but it's the bit that goes to the moon comes from, and it's the only bit basically of the spacecraft that returns to Earth. So when you're in the Science Museum, if you go around the back of the command module, you can see burn marks on the command module from its re-entry, so as it came through the atmosphere. And you can also see the sheer tiny amount of space that the astronauts had to travel in. But when I was doing the tours back in the day, the thing that I loved talking about was the fact that we had a dress rehearsal for the moon landings, which sounds completely obvious when you say it. You know, you have a dress rehearsal for your school play. Why don't you have a dress rehearsal for the moon landings? But we may not have heard about that dress rehearsal. We didn't hear that they went to the moon, orbited the moon, didn't quite land on the moon, but then came back and it was successful. And so successful that meant that then people could go to the moon, orbit the moon, and land on the moon. And so, yeah, we hear the moon landings and you hear of Neil Armstrong, you might know about Buzz Aldrin, but you don't hear of the sheer number of people that are involved in that mission and the sheer amount of time that those people put into that mission to make it a success. And this goes throughout science and throughout any invention, really. There's no such thing as the lone genius. It always takes a huge team, a huge amount of time to come up with anything new. So whenever you hear of one person's achievement, take it for what it is. They are the face of that achievement. behind that face is a massive team who have spent a massive amount of time working towards this one particular goal. Now, I absolutely loved explaining this to families because we're often taught about the lone genius and this idea that they come up with all by themselves. And so to tip that on its head and show it how it actually is in science and technology, I think broadens it out to more people because, let's be honest, there's not many people in the world that are like, oh yes, I'm a genius, I can do everything by myself. And this starts people on that path thinking, do you know what, science and technology, they're not that intimidating, they are something that I could potentially do. And this is what my career has all been about, just showing people who normally don't give science and engineering a second glance that actually they are a good fit for you. You may have been conditioned into thinking that they're not, but they are awesome opportunities, and they could be awesome opportunities for the skills that you have. So that's at number 5. At number 4, we come a little bit forward in time, and we go to a time when I'd left the Science Museum and I was working at the BBC. And I wasn't always a presenter at the BBC. I worked my way up and I started off as a researcher. And I was a researcher on a science documentary series called Horizon. And I was lucky enough to work on a Horizon program about asteroids. Now, again, once more, I'm not an expert in space, but I had to do a lot of reading and a lot of research and talk to a lot of experts on asteroids and discover all of these things that I never knew I didn't know. And I also had to organise a 3-week shoot out in the US. And this involved getting access to some incredible places that I never thought I would get access to. We went to JPL in Pasadena, so NASA JPL. We went to the NASA Ames Research Center, and the things we saw models of meteors getting slammed into sand through giant microscopes. The clean rooms, just the stuff we saw was mind-blowing. But the best part of that entire trip, and I still can't believe to the day that we managed to get access to it, was we got access to the observatories on top of Mauna Kea. Now, for those of you who don't know Mauna Kea, it is in Hawaii, and it's a massive mountain and a volcano. I think it might actually be a volcano, but on top of that are world-renowned observatories. So you are driving up this mountain, and you've got to acclimatise for a lot of hours halfway up, but then you drive up past the acclimatization point, and you basically are driving through the clouds, and you end up above the clouds, so all you can see is just white fluff. And then you are confronted with these absolutely sparkling, even huge observatory domes, and they are mind-blowingly beautiful. And so we got to spend time on top of Mauna Kea and talk to this asteroid expert, and it was phenomenal. Or each in turn of us, we did get altitude sickness and we came back down, but that's a different story. But it was just something that I never thought I would get to see in my lifetime. If you ever have an opportunity to go and see the observatories on Mauna Kea, do go. Okay, so that was number 4. At number 3, we're going to come a little bit forward in time again, and we are going to go to a time when I was still working at the BBC, but I was working in a department called the Learning Department, BBC Learning. And if you don't know, the BBC Learning Department, it's their role to engage an audience with a programme. So normally you watch a programme, right? Then when you turn off the programme, you might turn off from the subject. But what BBC Learning's role was, and what my role was when I was there, is to keep people thinking about that subject even when the programme isn't on. So the programme might spark something, and then you give them that opportunity to find out more about it. Now, as timing would have it, I started in BBC Learning when a new program was coming out, and they were trialing a new thing. It was like event television. It was Stargazing Live was coming out for the first time. And Stargazing Live, gosh, I don't know if it's still going, but it went for many, many years, and it was presented by Brian Cox. And I am going to forget his name now, Darragh O'Brien. So it's presented by Brian Cox and Darragh O'Brien and Liz Bonin. And basically it was getting the nation to lock up. Now it was my role to come up with ways to engage with people after they watched the programme. And so I was so lucky in this role that I got an excuse to meet all of the astronomy groups that are up and down the UK. And I was absolutely blown away by this community that I never knew existed, and that was so welcoming and so enthusiastic about their subject. And it was an absolute honour to work with them and collaborate with them to organise what became known as star parties. And in the end, I was on the phone, I'm calling them all up, trying to explain to them what this programme was and what we wanted to do with these star parties. Was that in the end we blew all targets just completely out the water, and I think it was 200 and something star parties were organised up and down the country. Bear in mind this was in January in the UK, so hundreds, thousands of people would go out after watching Stargazing Live to a star party, and maybe even watch it at the star party as well, and were looking through telescopes for the very first time. And it was absolutely brilliant to be welcomed into that community. And also, as part of that job, I got the privilege to write a star guide. Now, this was a star guide, it was before there was mobile phones where you could just have an app to sort of look up and see what the stars were. So we wanted people to actually know what they were looking at. So with the help of the phenomenal Pete Lawrence, who gave so much time and knowledge to me, we wrote this star guide, which people could print out and use to know what they were looking at. And this is my claim to fame. This star guide was at the time, I'm not sure if it is now, but it was the highest download ever on a BBC website. So yeah, I only wrote the words, I didn't draw the drawings. But yeah, so that was Pete Lawrence that drew all the stars, which were the important bit, let's be honest. But yeah, I was pretty proud of that. And also, yeah, like I said, just blown away by being welcomed into that community. And if you don't know about the community, there are astronomy clubs up and down the UK. Just search it and you will find people that have telescopes no matter where you are. There's even astronomy groups in London where you can actually look through telescopes and see some decent stuff right in the centre, even with all that light pollution. So do get on that. So that was number 3.